And we're live. Hello, and welcome to the
Hello.
Bold Leadership Stories Show, where we talk about experiences shaping exceptional lives. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Laura Farnsworth. Laura has been busily working on several degrees. She's got like a whole Campbell's soup can of letters behind her name now, and, and,
Yes.
and I'm excited to learn more about that, Laura. Today, what's your favorite designation at this point?
Well, it is soon to be Doctor of Clinical Nutrition. So when I get
Wow.
that,
Okay, so
I'm
we'll
going
have
to
to address
really
you as
compact
Dr.
those
Farnsworth.
initials. Yeah. So that is the end, the terminal degree in clinical nutrition is the Doctor of Clinical Nutrition. It's a newer degree. So I'm plugging along at that, and it's just ongoing learning. So I went into an awareness of health and wellness at a very young age as a teenager and went down various paths. So, massage therapy, childbirth education, as a fitness coach. But nutrition was always my first appeal or love. So, I'm
Hmm.
so honored to be able to complete this degree pretty soon.
That's exciting. Yeah, I know a doctor. It's cool. So let me read a little bit of your bio here. So Laura Farnsworth, you have a company called Craving for Health,
Yes,
craving for the number four health.com. Yeah,
yes,
we'll put that up in a little banner here in a sec. And you're a functional and integrative nutritionist.
I am. Yes.
So that's a mouthful.
It
Explain
is,
that.
and I wish there were an easier, more concise way to explain that. So there is a little bit of recognition out there or knowledge. So functional, in a nutshell, just means that I'm looking for root causes. So if somebody comes to me wanting to lose weight, weight gain is a symptom of very many things going on in the body. So what I look for is trying to figure out, well, why does this person need to lose weight? And let's solve those issues first. The integrative piece is huge. That is a big piece of what I do, and that's looking at whole life factors. So that's looking at sleep, stress, all the our passions in life, all the things that motivate us, because that determines the foods that we choose, and that
Mhm.
determines how we use the foods that we're metabolizing, where it goes, if it's stored as fat or is it if we're able to burn it.
Okay, so that is to me that's like where the rubber meets the road in terms of getting your body healthy. It's Western medicine has their place in my
Yes.
view. They're great with like acute. If I break my arm or I need something, I need an operation done. American medical system is great, but anything that has to do with chronic disease or any it's that they just throw a pill at you.
Yes. So my whole thing is I'm just a naturalist at heart. I,
Hmm.
of course, support everyone's journey. And obviously, conventional medicine has its place, and I support that. But I'm trying to assist individuals who are trying to do things a little bit more non-conventionally, so more naturally. It's like, okay, I'm borderline, X situation,
Hmm.
subclinical, or I've been established with a specific disorder, condition, and I need assistance in reversing this or improving my symptoms. And that's when I assist with that and provide a whole toolbox of lifestyle approaches and dietary approaches that can help with those symptoms and help improve those chronic life conditions that so many Americans have.
Yeah. Oh, crazy. What do you, in your view, in your experience, what's the transition of somebody that is been immersed in the Western medicine culture and is now looking at alternatives and thinking what is that and why should I want that?
Well, I think that there is a whole lot more credibility. So these ideas that are non-conventional, they've taken on different names over the years, but it's all essentially the same thing. integrative, holistic. There are different names that are applied to this. CAM, complementary medicine. But what is really giving it clout these days is so much research that supports its efficacy or its effectiveness. So when I'm in a doctoral program, I'm doing a lot of perusing research. So everything I recommend is evidence-based, and I am just astounded at so much research that supports basic things like adhering to circadian rhythms, which is one of my new passions, sleep, getting sufficient sleep, managing your stress can really make the difference for a lot of us in whether or not we do have these chronic health conditions. So if we're able to manage the sleep and the stress and all of that, we're going to help our blood pressure. We're going to help our heart function better. We're going to decrease our risks for a lot of these other chronic or acute type of health conditions that can manifest. So that is the research piece of it that is validating all of these, I don't know, some of these more conventional practitioners who don't see the research as I do every day. They may not, may discount it, but there are more and more centers and universities that are implementing these types of protocols and these types of approaches, the functional medicine and the functional nutrition. The integrative piece is huge as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's refreshing to hear your words. It's like somebody who's really smart is digging in and getting that research to help others to prosper and live a better life.
And the thing is, a lot of this is free. So just personally, I'm a very frugal individual. So when I work with individuals, families, groups, I always look for the least cost practices that people can do. And most of these are free. Just walk outside, just get some sunlight in the morning. And that is not the case. I will say I have an awareness of individuals who have, food insecurity, or they are living in an area where it's all concrete. So I have that awareness, and I am aware of my own privilege. But for many of us, many of these types of practices are in fact free, that can be done every day, and they can make huge changes in our lives.
Excellent. So let's look and see. Okay, here's what you do. Laura empowers women in perimenopause.
Yeah, so that means before the menopause period, which can be several years to a decade. It's kind of like the opposite of puberty. And if any of you have teenagers going through puberty at the same time that you're going through this, it is fun in the house, as many of us who have had children later in life can experience.
Oh boy. Well, it's good to have someone again like you to kind of help make that transition a little easier. So then you work with menopause, and then to experience improved health and vitality through natural ancestral methods. And then you've got your website, Cravings for Health. So ancestral methods, what does that mean?
So that's going back to one of my passions. It has been studying cultural anthropology. So every time I'm presented with a concept, a dietary concept, a fad, I go, what did my ancestors do? How did they eat? How did they practice this? So culture is a big piece of this, how we relate to food, how we view food. I lived in Japan for 3 years while I was completing my undergraduate degree in psychology and social science. So that was a phenomenal experience. And in that, I studied cultural anthropology and sociology and cross-cultural psychology. So that is a piece that I think is missing in American culture, is that we are so motivated by marketing that we've lost connection with our food, and also just how we're disconnected from how our food is prepared, grown. We're very disconnected. So it is just going back to basics as far as how do we relate to food, and then how it can be applied. So for example, ancestral methods would be adhering to circadian rhythms, for example, and a lot
So
of us are
explain
out of
what
state.
circadian rhythms are.
So circadian rhythms, there's a lot of exciting research. For example, so I teach conventional nutrition courses and I teach integrative and functional nutrition courses at different universities.
Mm-hmm.
And the conventional nutrition approach states that it's all calories in and calories expended. And it doesn't really matter the types of foods that you eat, the quality, or the timing of eating, right? But that's not the case. So if you do any perusing of research, as I do on a daily basis, there's newer research that's come out that indicates the timing of when you eat makes a difference. Something called insulin sensitivity is highest in the mornings and lowest at night. So if you're a night owl and you like to skip breakfast and eat all night long, well, there is perhaps a greater chance, as research has indicated, looking at night workers, for you actually to store those calories as fat as opposed to burning them. So the timing matters. Also, we are surrounded by electronics, that's blue lights, and blue light is the light. So if you look in the sky during the day, it's blue, right? If you look in the sky at sunset, dusk, the colors there are more are warmer, right? So you've got the reds and the yellow or the oranges.
Like that photo behind you.
So the red light is the calming, let's go to bed. The blue light is the let's get active. So most of us are in front of screens that are telling our brains and our body, let's get active. So many of us have difficulty sleeping because we're constantly being surrounded or looking at these blue lights. So when you do something as simple as go outside in the morning, the sun is red light. Now, obviously, you don't want to stare directly in the sun, but if you get that morning light, specifically morning light, daylight, and you could be in a cloudy environment, as I have lived, but the best advice I ever received was from a lady who moved to Washington State from San Francisco, and I had just moved there, and she said, doesn't matter the weather, raining, get outside every day, and it will help reset your circadian rhythms. It's like, huh, and I was in the middle of my master's program at that time. I was like, oh, that's great advice. So just getting outside morning is better if that doesn't work for you during the day, and get that daylight, and that helps actually create melatonin at night. So that daylight signals for later in the day for that melatonin. Now, obviously, there can be some hijacking happening with the electronic devices and things like that, but circadian rhythms are so important. So melatonin is important for sleep, but there are many other purposes and functions that these hormones, these neurotransmitters serve in the body.
Very good. So what would you say, based on all of your study now, what would you say is the biggest opportunity for the average person, say 40 years old, to learn from what you know?
So the best advice that I can give to anyone 40 or over is to honor what your body is telling you, because so many of us have gone so many years, and it's very ingrained in American culture to not listen to your body, push yourself, don't get sleep, move, do, be busy. That's productivity or success in American culture. And your body simply is going to say no. When you get to be a certain age, it is pushing back hard, and it's giving you all these messages, and we're trying to silence them through conventional, just throw a pill at it, or other ways. And these are subtle messages that your body is telling you until the point that your body's going to scream at you. So you have to honor your body's needs for sleep, honor your body's needs for rest. Rest is one of the best things that you can do. Just sit and do nothing. It is a wonderful time for creativity and for productivity when you give yourself that opportunity. If you're not into meditation, which I do recommend, just simply sitting, just being with yourself, being mindful. There's so much benefit that can happen with that.
So I hear that term a lot now, mindfulness, right? And they have people teaching mindfulness now, and it's like, okay, the next buzzword. What what is that? I know it's probably something that's really good, but what's your take on what mindfulness is and how it can help?
Oh, mindfulness is a huge part of my master's program. So I completed my Master of Science in Nutrition and Integrative Health
Because
at
I think
MUIH.
mindful, like mindset. I grew up in the sales world, right? So it's like mindset,
Yeah,
positive thinking, PMA, boom, 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 boom. And
yeah,
that's like the kind of the opposite
yeah. So
of
it is.
mindfulness.
Let's look at just a child coloring, or adults can color. That's a mindful practice. So coloring, knitting, drawing, yoga is one of the most well-known types of mindfulness practices. There's
Mhm.
a concept called mindful eating because we've lost touch with just sitting around the table, communicating, talking, and enjoying our food, that we have to learn again how to mindfully eat. And it's where we're just present with our food. And you know what? Food tastes a whole lot better when you're actually paying attention to the food that you're eating, and you're, tasting it, and you're breathing in between. So mindfulness just simply means that you know what the rest of you is doing at that moment in time. It's really not complicated. There's just a connection. You're not multitasking, you're not talking and doing various things. Eating in the car, or watching TV and eating is something that we commonly doing. Well, that's not mindfully eating. Obviously, you can do that, if you want to, but to fully enjoy your food, that would be to really be present with the food at that moment.
Okay. Reminds me, well, the how I grew up, my home, I had two older sisters and mom and dad, and mom had every night we had dinner at the dinner table. And if you weren't there, you had to have a really good reason, or you were in deep, deep, deep Dan Bandini. And,
Yes.
and we would have every night music, no phone calls, a fine silver, candles, and we would sit and talk and eat. And my dad sometimes would read poetry. We'd talk about the day. We'd bring up, conversation about what was going on and family time. And I tell you what, that was mindfulness for me.
It is.
I missed that, but that it was a time where it was relaxing, and my mom would cook food, and it was wholesome, and she was a good cook, so really lucky, and it wasn't processed. It was real, you know, real food, and I knew where it came from. It was either
Yes.
from a garden, or it was from, it was sometimes it was from the grocery store. But I mean, a lot of times we would have friends give us different produce and meats and different things. And so I learned a lot about that. And I guess I was really lucky.
And some of it is very generational. So I grew up, I was born in the 60s. I grew up in the 70s.
Hmm.
And there was just things were just different. We didn't have in the 70s that I recall a lot of processed foods available to us. I
Right.
remember
Yeah.
the
TV dinner.
Swanson's TV
Remember
dinner. That
the
was a
TV
big, big
dinners was like
deal.
a big deal. I couldn't stand those things.
Yeah.
It was gross.
Yeah. So I think things were just very different. It wasn't, I think, until the 80s that I recall that there was just an influx in a lot of processed foods. And that is the timing when we shifted to low fat, and everything really changed. Then you had all these low fat products that were available in grocery stores and elsewhere. And I think the whole American culture really shifted towards the late 70s and 80s.
And how do
And
you
some of
think
them
we've
don't know
all done with that?
that. Well, so if you look at any type of, CDC statistics or anything else, obviously, um, I think we've reached a plateau recently, but our life expectancy has gone down. The number of overweight and obese, and again, this is a symptom of a greater issue. My whole objective whenever I work with clients is not to lose weight. It is to fix what's causing that. So metabolic dysfunction is at an all-time high. And some of it is eating patterns. So when I go back to ancestral eating, when I had first heard about this concept of time restricted eating, and I think I know you're into that, I was like, okay, is this a fad? What's going on? And then, well, I did the research first. I looked on PubMed for a lot of research
I
that
love PubMed.
substantiates its effectiveness, and more specifically, morning use, eating windows, as opposed to late eating windows. And then I reflected on my own childhood and went, wait a minute, especially in the wintertime, I was eating my meal at 7 and I was eating my next meal at 7 again as a child, a young child. I didn't eat late before I went to bed. I didn't eat. So as a child, I was having a 12-hour overnight non-eating window. And we didn't have snacks at school. I remember that. It was very different than it is in school today. So our whole eating patterns have shifted to more frequent eating, more frequent snacking, and just an obsession with diet culture. So how I try to work with individuals is trying to bring them back to more ancestral eating patterns and more what would be appropriate for them without also causing a negative relationship with food, because that's already out there. So a lot of people perceive this way of eating as a fad or detrimental, especially for those individuals who have eating disorders, and I do give that credit. However, just looking back at my own childhood and then looking back even further, generations past, human history has showed us that we didn't eat very frequently because we simply didn't have the way to store the food or didn't have the means to eat all day long. It just is not normal for humans to eat all day long.
Yeah. Well, and we could get into this. I've been studying mitochondria and microbiome and resistant starches and eating windows. And I have an eating window of about 4 hours now every day. And I've recently created a stop gap at 6 p.m. for, stop eating everything at 6. And so, and it is so much benefit. Like you say, eventually your body gives up. Back in 2020 in February, my body basically filed divorce papers on me.
Oh.
Yeah. I said, dude, because I was working like 12, 14 hours a day. I wasn't exercising. I was eating crap. I was gaining weight and stressed to my gourd on, everything was just going sideways. And I was struggling to get things going. And then COVID hit and my body just flew through the red flag and said, I'm done with you, dude. I'm leaving. And you're coming with me or not, And so I had to make some decisions. And boy, I was really fortunate to have some really good people in my life at that point who gave me a book by Dr. Gundry, said, read this. And then they said, there's a DO, Dr. Blansett. You know Dr. Blansett.
I sure do, yeah.
Dr. Lori, yeah. She said, it's your diet. She just pointed it, it's your diet. That's all she said. So I was like, okay, got it. And it's like, oh, what the heck do I do now? And so I started this program and went through, lost about 50 pounds and went through this whole metamorphosis, learning so much. It was such, in the end, a blessing for me to go through that because I decided, okay, I'm going to be 100% responsible for my health. I didn't, I went to the doctor, they did blood tests, they looked at everything, said, you're fine, get out of here. I said, no, I'm not.
But you didn't feel fine.
No, I did. Well, I had neuropathy going on and I had like rheumatoid arthritis starting. I had the phase 1 RA going on in my joints and my feet, and it was painful. And it's like, and I started studying about how Western medicine handles that. And they just basically give you a bunch of drugs. And I know my body can heal itself. I'm going to take the responsibility myself and I'm going to learn this. And I went through a process. I completely cut everything out of my food and I added things one at a time and just went through that process. It took like 2 years and I learned how to fast. I learned all about mitochondria. I learned all about microbiome. I learned all about different foods and all the stuff that we eat now. I can't go into a grocery store. The only thing I can, when I go to Winco, the only thing I can buy is the wild caught salmon.
Yeah.
That's it. So anyway, what you're doing is teaching people about all that stuff. So you could have saved me like 3 years worth of that.
And, it's obviously helpful to have your own path. And you bring up a really good point. So I work with a lot of individuals and they kind of want to make changes, but they're not at the point where it's more painful to change, or more painful to stay the same, I should say, than it is to change. And you
Right.
have to be at that point where you realize this is too painful to stay the same. I really need to change. And it's important also to mention that we are changing human beings. And what worked for me in my 20s is not going to work for me in my 40s or my 50s. And it's finding what works for you at this moment in time, the path that you're on right now, the age that you're at, and the set of needs that you have. Because especially being female, our nutrient needs are shifting and changing all the time. And it's really important, if we're going to follow something like a time restricted eating, or as I call it, timed interval eating, because it just sounds too restrictive. I don't like the way they call it.
Yeah.
It's important too to make sure that
You're a doctor now. You can call it whatever you want.
I know. Make sure that we preserve muscle mass, bone health. It's so important that it's done correctly. There are so many plans out there that if you don't do it correctly, then you're not going to have the results that you want. Not just weight loss, but you need to make sure that you're preserving always the lean muscle and bone mass and not losing that along with the fat that you're trying to lose, or just trying to maintain the weight that you have.
Right. Yeah, it's so important. I've done 4 6-day water fasts, and I've lost each time between 12 and 15 pounds. And this last time I had a benefit of a scale that you stand on, and it sends an electric pulse through your body. You have
Yes.
something on your hands, and you're standing on something too, and it sends this through. I don't know how accurate it is, but I think you do it over time, and you're getting some kind of a relative score on all these things.
Yeah. So the bioelectrical impedance. So it's looking at body composition.
Okay.
And some of them are more or less accurate. If you want it really accurate, you go into like a university setting, one of those high-tech ones. And those handheld ones are basically getting your upper body as well. Because if you're just standing on it, you're only getting your lower body. So the reason why you're holding it at the top too is to give the average of your, and most of them will even say like right arm, left arm, and you might see a difference. Cool. I have one of those at my gym as well. I used to do that as a fitness coach too, run those types of machines. So yes.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then you brought something up that was interesting for me. I this last time we fasted, I was checking my glucose and ketones. I have a little monitor that I use. It's right here. And
yes.
So I take my blood. I was doing it 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. And I was tracking that and looking at glucose and ketones as I was doing my fast. And I noticed that my glucose was high. I wanted it to be around, 65, between 65 and 80 in fasting, right? And I was up more closer to 100. And after like the 4th day, it got down into the 70s finally, but it took a while. And then I started tracking it after we ended the fast. And I'd get up first thing in the morning, I'd take my glucose. And I've been tracking that every day for the last almost 3 weeks. And I've been over 100 average. Some days were like 92, some days were 124. But the average is somewhere between 102 and 105, something like that. So to me, that's unacceptable because that's in the pre-diabetic range. And I believe, based on what I started reading about, okay, why am I doing, what's happening? And I'm thinking maybe you could concur, you could
well, I can give
whether or not I'm on the right track. Get some free advice here.
Here's the interesting thing, and this is why if you read online, you'll go, there'll be some individuals who will believe that time restricted eating, or timed interval eating, as I call it, is not beneficial for women specifically because, and this goes for males, females, is that when you're fasting, it can raise cortisol. And it's a natural human response because, and you may notice that initially, like if you're in a non-eating window, you might notice, man, I can think clearer. I just have so much energy, at least when you're first starting out. That's because your cortisol, your stress hormones are being raised and your glucose is going up. And the reason for that is so that you can find food. You want to make sure that you've got the energy that you need to find food. So when that happens, you might need to modify, I don't know all the details, you might need to rethink or modify the approach because it could be that your body is then too stressed. You've got too much cortisol, too much glucose. And some individuals need to back off a little bit on that.
I wasn't exercising. So now I've put in an hour at zone 2 heart rate, 40 minutes to an hour every day if I can do it. And that's helping to bring that down because it's using up the glucose.
Yes. So just keep that in mind. And then also other types of practices, mindful type of practices. Yeah, so obviously exercise can lower blood glucose, but also keeping that in mind is if your body is feeling stressed, and then you have to take a look at sleep and other practices to see what maybe needs to be modified in order to make this work for your body, because your body could be feeling a little bit more stress than it should. And then just seeing what needs to be modified there.
Okay. Yeah. Good advice. So what do you see coming up in the future for integrative nutrition?
Oh, there's so much. It's so specifically the integrative piece is trying to make that the integrative lifestyle approaches, the epigenetics piece of it, common knowledge. Because right now people look at this as sleep, stress, that doesn't make any difference. Oh my goodness, it makes a huge difference. It could be the difference between being pre-diabetic or diabetic and not. So
yeah, and ignoring it like that's how I was ignoring it. And that's I started listening when my body basically, like I said, filed divorce papers.
And really understanding how this is not these, because when you understand the biochemical pathways, when you understand how cortisol and raised insulin can affect so many other processes in the body, including inflammatory processes, and all chronic illness is tied to inflammation. There's a big light bulb that goes on every single time. And I go, darn it, there it goes again. It's always connected somehow to the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the rest and digest, or the microbiome. It's one of those two things. It's always somehow connected, interconnected. And stress also can dysregulate your microbiome or your gut microbiota as well. So just looking at all those pieces. But one of the areas that's still being nuanced is something called nutritional genomics. And that's where you look at a subset of, these are single nucleotide polymorphisms. These are alleles. These are alleles or little markers on genes. And looking at these to see how these can influence how you react to foods, how you react to everyday stressors, how you do with like a higher fat diet, how you process caffeine and other medications, because there are similar pathways, and seeing the individual or the bio-individuality. So where nutrition is hopefully going is precision nutrition, looking at your specific genetics, your specific health history, and making recommendations, medical and nutrition recommendation based on your specific needs.
So that sounds like I had a test. I sent away for a test by Viome.com. Have you heard of them?
I have, yes.
Yeah, and they send you a kit. You give them your fluids and everything, and send that off, and they do an amazing analysis, and they come back and say, yeah, you're good here, you're kind of good here, and you need help here, and they take all that stuff into consideration, the microbiome, and all of the metabolic aspects too. So pretty fascinating.
It is. Every day I'm just blown away, which is why I decided to pursue an additional degree, which I didn't need to do, but I just felt like there's so much more to learn, and I wanted to really feel confident in what I was providing, because I'm a skeptical individual. So it's like, would I hire me? Okay, yeah, now I would.
All right, cool. Well, I wanted to go into, let's take a look at your website.
Sure.
Let's see if I can pull that up. There we go. So we have Craving for Health.
Yes.
And you have one-on-one coaching, online courses, live events, and then you're doing improve your relationship with food, and then designing a plan that works for you.
So the main areas that I work with is one-on-one. And the reason why I use the term coaching, I want to clarify that. So with my credentials, my academic background and work history, in most states, I qualify to do what's called medical nutrition therapy. Mm-hmm. However, there are some states, because I practice telehealth, so I see clients across the country and across the world, and I have to make sure that I am practicing nutrition with them consistent with the laws in which they reside. So the coaching piece of it would be just general type of health knowledge. But for those individuals who reside in a state that allows medical nutrition therapy with my credentials, I do perform more specifically. So looking at chronic health conditions and food plans and lifestyle plans to help improve that.
Excellent. So when would somebody realize that they would benefit from what you do? What are the you listening to your body, and then there's signs that it's telling you things aren't right. What are some of those signs?
Well, this happens a lot, and I work with, I've worked, especially through my internship and my early clinical work. I don't not work with men, but I feel like I have the most tools and the most skills to work with women of a certain age range. So that's the perimenopause and menopause. And it's something, I'm in my 50s. It's something I have a lot of experience with, clinically and personally. So in this age range, it is a lot. Perimenopausal symptoms are when the body starts to scream. And that's when a lot of women will have the insomnia. Their hormones are starting to fluctuate. That's when they have the hot flashes. All these different symptoms, they're becoming more irritable. And the way that I look at it is a little differently maybe than some other practitioners. And I look at it with the analogy or the depiction that you are trying to fully align with your real self. You're trying to really voice your true feelings and true needs. And that's really what's happening. It's a shift from trying to please to being of oneself and one's identity. It's a whole metamorphosis that women go through. And you can approach it with fear, or you can approach it with empowerment. And that's the difference, is I try to take from these cultures where perimenopause and menopause is not a terrible thing. It's an empowering thing. It's something to look forward to. So I try to instill that in the women whom I work with, so that there is no fear and there's somebody to guide them, because there isn't a lot of discussion about it. A lot of it's hush hush. Nobody sat me down when I was a kid and said, this is what's going to happen to you when you get older. We just simply don't talk about it, because there's a big fear of aging. There's a lot of ageism in our society and our culture. So bringing that together and providing that guidance.
Very good. So what is Full Script?
Full Script is it's the database that, or the distillery, or whatever term you want to look at. What do they call it? This is where a dispensary, distillery, that's the alcohol. Dispensary is where you...
that's where you get the single malt.
Yeah, that's the supplements, the nutraceuticals. So I do have a list for anyone who wants to just see my favorite list. But for ethical reasons, I prefer to provide personalized nutraceutical supplements. I don't recommend them for everyone, but for some people, they can benefit. And so I do provide personalized recommendations for my clients. And then I have a general, like my favorite list that anyone can sign up for.
Excellent. And then my favorite part is the recipes.
Yes. And quite
These look
frankly,
really
I
good.
haven't done a lot with this lately. I am trying to get back into blogging and the recipe piece. I think I've done some on social media that I have not posted here. So again, it's a lot of it is juggling responsibilities. But I wanted to, some of these are not as active as I'd like them to be, such as because before COVID, I was giving workshops one-on-one or group workshops as well as more in person, and just things shifted because of COVID or the pandemic. So a lot of these things will be reopening. I will provide more in-person workshops, provide more in-person type of, education.
Okay. Yeah, that quiche looks amazing.
And that is mine. Some of just like maybe one or two of these are stock images because I'm the kind of person who cooks and doesn't write things down half the time. So I'm like, oh shoot, I did that and I didn't get a picture. But
Yeah, I
that
do
berry
that.
crumble pie, that one's definitely mine. That smoothie is mine. One of my favorite things is to make these crepes that are cassava or cassava based
Oh yeah,
crepes. They're
I made
so
some
good.
cassava flour and coconut flour tortillas.
Yes,
They were
they're
good.
so good. So obviously you can make it however you want, but my kids they just love that so much.
Yeah, green
Yeah, I
eggs.
got to repost that one for St. Patty's Day. So this is
Yeah.
how I get more veggies, and plus the kids like the now my son's now 13, but he really was into that. He was like, "Oh yay, it's green.
That's fun. And
Spinach
then
in there."
yeah, and then these got my attention. Mocha black bean brownie muffin.
That one that's tested, tried and true. I provided that to my son years ago in his preschool class.
Uh-huh.
And I kid you not, the kids just gobbled them up, all except for one. They all gobbled it up. And I even had a child come up to me and ask me for the recipe. And I
No
was like,
way. Preschool?
okay, this one works. And you can make them with coffee or not. My kids love coffee. So I do it with ground coffee. I do it very finely ground. Otherwise, it ends up being a little gritty. But these are made with beans. There's no flour. And you can modify the sugar if you want to. But I make these with dates.
Oh, yeah, I love dates. We pretty much eliminated sucrose, table sugar, so we use other stevia and other. I use date syrup or pomegranate syrup, or some small amounts of other sweeteners, and it's fine.
Yes.
It's just fine. So very fun. Well, Laura, we've been going. This goes so fast. Let's look at the time. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, just want to mention something real quick is fermentation is another real passion of mine. Before
Really,
COVID, before
fermentation.
the pandemic, I did a fermentation workshop, and I want to get back into that. It's one of my loves, is
Did you
talking
write
about
about that?
fermentation, making it's something so easy. It really to make your own sauerkraut is so inexpensive and so easy. So it's something that I try to teach
I'd
as
love to
often as I
take a
can.
course on that. Next time you have one, I'd love to
Yes.
pop in. I have one more question. You got time for one more?
Sure, I do.
Okay, awesome. So I have, let's see if I can, there we go. I have one more question. I ask this of everybody on the show, and it's taking a look at your whole life and the biggest, boldest leadership decision that you've made. What was it, and what were the consequences?
Wow, the biggest, boldest leadership decision that I've made. I've had so many twists and turns in various careers, and it all took a great amount of risk. But I will say the entrepreneurial thing is the biggest and boldest thing for me because it's so outside of my comfort zone. I have, feel really comfortable. I'm an introvert, so I feel really comfortable, or more of an introvert, feel really comfortable with the academic piece and teaching online and all of that. But it's that putting myself out there and really trying to work those skills that are so don't come naturally to me. So deciding to go into my own practice instead of working for someone else has been the biggest and boldest move that I've made. And that has the whole path, though, going back to school and everything. It's just kind of been just several things, several different, you know, crossroads and taking different paths along the way. And that's allowed me so many opportunities. I just could have never imagined all the opportunities that I'm being presented with. So, but it's getting outside your comfort zone. That's the thing that I've most benefited from, the most uncomfortable, but the most rewarding aspect.
Very good. Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
I
you've come a long
appreciate it.
way. I've been chasing you for almost a year to come on the show. But
Yes, yeah.
not really chasing. I mean, it's just like, yeah. But so happy you joined me today. Thank you so much.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, hang on a sec. I'll end the show. Say goodbye.
Yes, bye.
Bye.